really do impulsive decision at this moment.
Meanwhile, in Egypt, millions of people are said to have filled the streets across the country, but this time in celebration of the success of their revolution. Thousands of people spent the night in Liberation Square in Cairo. They still want to maintain some pressure on the new interim government. It has promised democratic reforms, but the ruling military council has also said it will not tolerate any more strikes. The United States has vetoed a UN resolution that would have branded Israel's settlements as illegal. The resolution had the backing of 14 out of 15 members of the Security Council, but the one US vote was enough to defeat it. Washington has instead offered to support a weaker, non-binding presidential statement that would reject the legitimacy of Israel's settlement. The decision by DC has prompted angry Palestinians to vow that they will now re-evaluate the entire Middle East peace process. The US Secretary of State, meanwhile, has called on Pakistan to stop encouraging what she called anti-American sentiment. Hillary Clinton's remarks come amid anger in Lahore over the killing of 2 Pakistanis by a US embassy employee. Raymond Davis says he was acting in self-defense when he shot the 2 men last month. The US says he has diplomatic immunity and they want Pakistan to remove him. Those are the headlines. Egypt burning is next.
Revolution in Egypt. After 7 days of mass protests, a people's movement has taken hold throughout the country, demanding the end of Hosni Mubarak's 30 years in power. But the regime is about to fight back. Tahrir, or Liberation Square, in the center of the Egyptian capital, Cairo. Police have melted away. The army has moved in, but has done nothing to stop the protests. The protesters are full of hope that the regime is cracking. They have called for 1 million people to rally in Tahrir Square.
Yeah, and I asked them, you've been here for over a week, the president still hasn't left. Do you think that will make any difference? They said today, as far as they were concerned, February the 1st will be a day to live in Egypt's history.
We came early this morning and there were not that many people, but now I have to say the square is completely full. People are determined. What we started is not going back. There's absolutely no fear of the government.
It seems as though every neighborhood of Cairo is emptying out and the occupants are flooding towards the square. There is really a sense of humanity on the move. It is remarkable, the broad cross-section of society you're seeing there.
For the first time in Egyptian history, from Pharaohs till now, Egypt had a genuine revolution.
ليه حرام حينا تغيير كل سنة يبقى في تغيير حرام 30 سنة تعب.
It's so big that people have now spilled out into other streets, other alleyways, and some of the squares that are just off the main Liberation Square. And really, you feel that it's just growing. There's just more and more people joining in.
The atmosphere there really was more like some kind of a rock festival, if you like, Egypt's Woodstock, more than a demonstration.
The police, normally everywhere, are nowhere.
Since the violent protests of Friday, the only visible manifestations of the police in Cairo have been limited traffic directing duties. Ultimate responsibility for the security of the demonstration has fallen to the army.
The president himself, he has tried to appease the public. He has sacked the government. He has appointed a new government. He's tried to announce new initiatives, appoint a vice president. All of that has only brought out more people day after day, day after day. It does not seem that they are going to be easily satisfied unless the president himself stands down.
A lot of people here are telling us they're extremely frustrated. They don't understand why the president, in their own words, is not getting their message.
I think when the images became apparent that they exceeded 1 million people, that in fact so many walks of life had come to Tahrir Square, it simply was no longer possible for the government to avoid it. It was simply no longer possible for the senior leadership of this government to try and just simply address the issue with political maneuvering.
Let's bring you up with the latest lines coming out on this developing story. Now, it's being reported that the Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak will speak to the people soon.
As President Mubarak was about to address the nation, there was a feeling of genuine excitement amongst the protesters. I was in the square as the screen flashed up with President Mubarak's image, and protesters ran to the screen.
I did not intend to run for the coming presidency. I have exhausted my life serving Egypt and its people. I tell you in plain words that in the few months remaining in my current term, I will work towards ensuring the measures and procedures that will guarantee the peaceful transition of power.
People were really heckling, people were chanting in the crowd. Clearly this falls far short of what their demands were.
Feeling fear has gone into possibly that of anger. They are extremely furious. They don't understand how the sheer amount of numbers that have come out in the streets in recent days has not been enough to convince them.
It galvanized and inspired, and perhaps with the help of other elements, triggered a great deal of pro-Mubarak supporters who felt that the president had been humbled, that the president had been, in some ways, forced into this position. And what we saw afterwards triggered a lot of violence.
As we were trying to make our way out of Tahrir Square, a lot of the protesters were actually trying to make their way back into the square and telling us not to leave, that there were reports of pro-Mubarak supporters heading into the heart of downtown to Tahrir Square to confront the protesters.
It isn't quite clear who the Mubarak supporters are, but with their arrival comes violence.
Okay. Do you hear the gunfire?
We hear shots being fired.
Well, clearly the confrontations seem to have begun between the two sides. We have seen dozens of the protesters disperse, run in different directions. There's clearly a sense of panic here.
US President Obama speaks to Mubarak for 30 minutes on the telephone. America urges the Egyptian president to back down.
After his speech, I spoke